Everything you thought you knew was a lie? For weeks, fans have been whispering, watching, decoding, obsessing. Why does Caitlyn Clark's sideline energy feel off? Why does Coach White keep dodging questions? Why did Caitlyn go completely silent when the rumors caught fire?
And I'm excited about the opportunity to work with them. I'm excited about the opportunity that we have.
Well, not anymore. Today, we're diving into the truth behind the narrative fissure, a phrase born in Reddit threads, but now confirmed by Clark herself in a moment that stunned the basketball world. Was it just a cheeky joke, or a coded message to those paying attention? And what does this mean for Indiana's future? This isn't tabloid gossip. This is about control, silence, power, and what happens when a generational talent refuses to play along. So buckle up, because once you see the full picture, there's no unseeing it. This is the story behind the silence, and it's explosive. It started as a moment so small you could have blinked and missed it. Just a few seconds during a podcast, no press conference, no bold statement, just Caitlyn Clark, seated casually next to WNBA legends like Sue Bird, speaking freely in a relaxed, unscripted setting.
It felt good to be out there. I thought we started really well. I thought we were competitive. I thought we played with energy in the first 5 minutes. And then, when they kind of went on their first run, it kind of deflated us a little bit, which I'm not really sure why. But the offense, I think, for us, it starts on defense. And we struggled, scouting report-wise. We struggled personnel. We struggled.
The topic was a bizarre rumor, the false report that Clark had declined a skills challenge at All-Star Weekend because she didn't want to shoot off a rack.
Clark laughed it off with a dry edge. I don't know who wrote the article, but whoever their source was wrong. It was classic Caitlyn, calm, composed, but with the undertone of someone finally done playing along with media narratives. That comment, nearly a throwaway line, exploded online. But what casual listeners heard as a moment of honesty, narrative analysts picked apart like forensic experts. Because it wasn't just about a debunked rumor. It was the tone, the timing, and more importantly, what came next. As the conversation flowed, Clark talked about being misunderstood, about being seen as too fiery on the court and too goofy off of it. She joked that even Coach White had recently told her people didn't realize how much comedic relief she brought to the locker room. To most, it sounded harmless, even warm. But for those who had spent weeks, even months, tracking the subtle signals, the lack of eye contact during timeouts, the awkward sideline huddles, the sudden change in Clark's body language after substitutions, this was something bigger. This was her first acknowledgement of the growing tension. And it was made even more powerful by how unintentional it seemed. That's what made it resonate. She didn't walk into that podcast planning to expose anything. But in letting her guard down, Clark gave fans the clearest window yet into the friction that had long been speculated but never confirmed. This was the first crack in the carefully polished public veneer, a narrative fissure that many believed had been building for months. And from that moment, the conversation shifted. It was no longer a question of if something was off between Caitlyn Clark and Coach White. It became a question of how deep it really went. If you only followed the official story, the polished interviews, the pre-game quotes, the ceremonial hugs, you'd believe Caitlyn Clark and Stephanie White had one of the most harmonious coach-player dynamics in the league. After all, Coach White has never said a bad word about Clark in public. Quite the opposite. During the toughest stretches of the Fever season, she publicly praised Clark's poise, her competitiveness, her leadership. She talked about protecting her peace and commended her maturity under a blinding spotlight. These weren't just throwaway compliments. They were carefully crafted narratives, the kind of messaging a franchise builds when its brand is tied to a superstar. But narrative analysts know better than to take public praise at face value. Because the body doesn't lie. And that's where the sideline signals come in. Zoom in on those Fever huddles from late June through mid-July. In multiple close-ups, Clark is seen standing with her arms crossed as Coach White speaks. At times, she's staring past her coach, face expressionless, almost as if she's somewhere else mentally. During substitution calls, there are subtle flashes of frustration, a long sigh, a look toward the bench with furrowed brows, and most notably, the avoidance of eye contact. It's not damning on its own. Players get frustrated. Coaches make tough calls. But pattern recognition matters, and by July, the pattern was hard to ignore. There's also the matter of in-game decisions. Several Fever fans, and even some analysts, began raising eyebrows at the rotations. Clark, often the engine of the offense, was being benched for long stretches of critical minutes. During crunch time, in nationally televised games, it sparked outrage on social media, with many asking, why bench your best player when the game is on the line? When questioned, White always had a poised, system-based answer. Managing fatigue, developing depth, trusting matchups. But behind those statements loomed an uncomfortable question. Was she also sending a message? Then there's Clark's response. Never combative, never openly rebellious, but quiet, calculated. And when she finally did speak in a podcast, referencing that she often feels misunderstood and sidelined in key decisions, it put all those sideline behaviors in a new light. They weren't isolated incidents. They were signals. And for fans attuned to every micro-expression and tweet, the contrast between the official smiles and the sideline silence was too stark to ignore. The facade of unity had been cracked. The narrative fissure was growing. Now that the fissure has been exposed, we're left with two competing and compelling theories. Each one paints a radically different picture of what's really happening inside the Indiana Fever locker room. Man Detective Theory A, the digital ghost. This theory suggests that there is no real feud between Caitlyn Clark and Stephanie White, at least not one of consequence. The so-called rift is a figment of online overanalysis, the result of a modern sports ecosystem obsessed with microdramas, narrative arcs, and fan-fueled conspiracies. Here's how it works. Social media thrives on speculation. A single clip of Clark glancing away during a timeout becomes a meme. A moment of frustration after being subbed out, the voice of institutional authority. The digital ghost theory says we're watching a narrative that feels true because it has the shape of truth, even if the substance isn't there. We crave drama. We expect power struggles. And we imagine slights, even where none may exist. In this version of the story, Clark's "stay in my lane" anecdote wasn't a grievance. It was a moment of growing pains. White's benching decisions weren't punishment. They were strategy. And every viral clip is simply a symptom of a hyper-analyzed sports culture, not a scandal in the making. But then there's Theory B. This one hits harder. It doesn't claim there's a meltdown or a full-scale rebellion, just real tension beneath the surface. The kind of friction that builds when a player sees the game one way, and her coach sees it another. In this theory, Clark and White have fundamentally different ideas about how leadership should work in the WNBA. Clark wants to be a vocal contributor, not just on the court, but in the locker room, in film sessions, even in franchise decisions. She's been the face of every team she's touched since high school. She changed how NCAA women's basketball was covered. She wasn't just part of the team, she was the team. So to enter a league, in a locker room, where her ideas are questioned, her minutes are managed, and her spotlight is carefully moderated, that's a rude awakening. Meanwhile, Coach White has her own pressures. She's running a team with playoff ambitions, managing egos, rotations, and long-term development. A rookie, even a superstar rookie, demanding more control can easily feel like a threat to her authority, especially in a league where a coach's job is always one losing streak away from instability. Now add Clark's rapidly growing brand, the media frenzy around every quote, and a mounting pressure to win. It's a powder keg. So in this theory, the "stay in your lane" comment wasn't just a phrase, it was a knife, a turning point, a moment that revealed how wide the philosophical gap had grown. Clark didn't explode. She didn't walk off the team. But in telling the story now, with poise and timing, she's asserting something quietly radical. You don't have to yell to make your truth heard. And White, her silence may not be indifference. It may be calculation. She knows the media will dissect her every word. So she says nothing. She lets the public speculate, while she controls what she can, the team. So which theory holds more weight? Is it the phantom of internet overreach or a real culture clash inside the Fever organization? The truth, as always, may lie in between. But understanding both theories gives us the context to ask the right next question. What are the consequences? No matter which one is true. Regardless of which theory you believe, the digital ghost or real friction, one thing is undeniable. And it's reshaping the Fever's identity, the WNBA's trajectory, and the conversation around player-coach power dynamics in professional women's basketball. For the Indiana Fever, this narrative fissure isn't just about Caitlyn Clark or Stephanie White. It's about trust and how it's rippling through every player in that locker room. When a player with Clark's stature publicly speaks about feeling ignored, diminished, or told to stay in her lane, it forces everyone else to reassess their own standing. How much say do they really have? Are their voices being heard, or just tolerated? Sources close to the team report that while no player has spoken out in direct support of Clark's comments, there's been a noticeable shift in energy. Practices are quieter. Eye contact between players and coaching staff has grown more formal. Veterans are walking a fine line, supporting both their teammate and their coach without choosing sides. Sophie Cunningham, who has stepped into Clark's starting spot during her injury absence, offered a cryptic remark after a recent game. We all have roles, and some of us are still figuring out who defines those roles. Some read that as a defense of White. Others saw it as a subtle nod to Clark's frustration. Either way, the locker room no longer feels untouched. For Coach Stephanie White, the stakes have never been higher. She's a respected veteran, a former WNBA Coach of the Year, a championship-winning tactician, and someone known for building disciplined, balanced teams. But now, every move she makes, every substitution, every late timeout, every post-game quote, will be interpreted through the Caitlyn Clark lens. Does she play Clark 36 minutes? She's bowing to the pressure. Does she limit her minutes again? She's punishing the superstar. Does she empower Clark in team huddles? She's caving. Keeps Clark out of rotations late in tight games. She's bitter. There's no neutral path anymore. The narrative is out there, and White has no control over how it's perceived. And in the WNBA, perception matters, especially with the league's rising media visibility and expansion talks. To add to the complexity, Clark's injury gives White a temporary reprieve and a movement. Her clash with a traditionalist coach, even if mild or misinterpreted, is symbolic of something bigger. Back-end index pointing right a league at a generational tipping point. Older coaches were trained to lead from authority. Younger players were raised to lead from influence. And when those models collide, friction is inevitable. The Clark-White fallout has now become the case study of this new paradigm. Other WNBA stars are watching closely. How teams, and the league itself, respond to these dynamics will shape future contract clauses, media policies, and player-coach relationships. If handled poorly, it could dissuade future stars from embracing full leadership roles early in their careers. If handled wisely, it might force a healthy evolution in how the league defines collaboration. Let's not pretend the media isn't a major player in this drama. The timing of Clark's revelation, just days before the All-Star break, sent producers, podcasters, and journalists scrambling. From ESPN to YouTube sports influencers, everyone wants a piece of the story. The hashtag Clark versus White trends every time Clark sits or White speaks vaguely. Even sports networks that usually cover men's leagues are diving deep into the debate. Why? Because this is more than basketball. It's culture, politics, gender dynamics, and workplace power all rolled into one. The WNBA hasn't commented publicly, but it doesn't need to. The media is already shaping the public's perception, especially with Clark's image as both a fighter and a figurehead for progress. And the longer the Fever organization stays silent, the louder the speculation grows. If there's one group feeling the full weight of this tension, it's the fans. Clark's followers, fiercely loyal and nationwide, are protective of her. They believe she's earned her platform, her voice, and her right to question systems that no longer serve her. On the other side, traditional Fever fans and WNBA purists argue that Clark needs to pay her dues, respect the process, and trust the system that brought her to this point. But here's the twist. Both groups are watching obsessively. Whether they agree or not, fans are engaged, talking, and invested. The Fever's TV ratings are climbing. Ticket resale prices for Clark's next expected return are already skyrocketing. Debate shows are dedicating segments to WNBA coaching culture, a rarity just 2 years ago. So, ironically, this conflict, real or exaggerated, is making the league stronger. Because conflict in sports doesn't just cause division. It causes attention, and attention is currency. With the storm fully unleashed, Caitlyn Clark's bombshell interview has left everyone asking, where does this go from here? The Indiana Fever have entered uncharted territory, not just in their season trajectory, but in franchise politics and media pressure. As it stands, 3 possible outcomes are being whispered in league circles, some more hopeful than others. Each one comes with massive implications not just for Clark and Coach Stephanie White, but for the Fever, the WNBA, and how modern athlete, coach power dynamics are navigated going forward. Let's break them down. This is the nuclear scenario, but not an impossible one. In this version of the future, the rift proves unrepairable. The Fever front office, faced with internal tension, negative press cycles, and a looming threat of distraction to the playoff race, is forced to make a call. And while it might seem unthinkable to let go of the Coach of the Year just months into a promising rebuild, Clark is the franchise now. She's the face on every billboard, the name that sells out arenas on the road, the engine behind the Fever's media rights boom. Letting her walk, or worse, losing her confidence in the system, would be catastrophic. Stop sign White is out. In this scenario, Indiana makes the hard decision in the offseason. White either steps down or transitions to a front office advisory role. A more player-empowering, media-savvy coach is brought in, someone who can both win games and manage the spotlight Clark brings. This would spark backlash from traditionalists, but send a clear message. Superstar empowerment is here, and it's not going away. Alternately, stop sign Clark is gone. If White has deeper backing from Fever ownership and Clark continues to clash with the system, trade murmurs could begin as early as next season. Unlikely? Yes, but not impossible. A blockbuster trade involving Clark to a team like the Chicago Sky, Seattle Storm, or Phoenix Mercury would shatter the WNBA media ceiling and force a reckoning on what player control really means in women's pro sports. Bottom line, the longer this festers without resolution, the more likely one of them has to go. This is the most diplomatic path forward, and possibly the smartest. Here, Clark and White agree, or urged, to sit down privately with Fever execs, sports psychologists, and perhaps even without becoming a constant headline for the wrong reasons. This route also protects the WNBA brand. The league is expanding, eyeing new markets, new TV deals, and Olympic-level partnerships. A public implosion involving its biggest star would be bad for business. Don't be surprised if big players, even behind the scenes at Nike or ESPN, quietly urge this outcome. This might be the most realistic short-term path. They don't like each other, but they live with it, for now. It's not ideal, but it's familiar. Many great athlete, coach duos have endured icy stretches. Kobe and Phil Jackson, Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy, Sue Bird and Donovan, early on. In this version, Clark returns post-injury, and the Fever keep winning. Public smiles return, but body language stays tight. Every press conference is carefully worded. Every bench interaction is analyzed on Twitter. The tension becomes part of the brand. Is there still beef between Clark and White? Becomes the headline of every away game preview. This keeps the media talking and the fans watching. But it's a pressure cooker. One bad losing streak, one heated timeout caught on camera, and the entire facade could crumble. If the Fever falls short in the playoffs or Clark's numbers decline further, all eyes will shift to 2026, a year that just so happens to coincide with Clark's endorsement escalators, White's contract extension window, the WNBA's looming CBA showdown. And if they can't make it through the season without another explosion, we're back to scenario one, but with more damage done. Clark's statement, "I didn't come here to be liked. I came to be great," is already being printed on t-shirts and quoted across WNBA podcasts. But greatness often comes at a price, especially for women in power, especially in a league still defining what modern stardom means. This isn't just about a coach and a player. It's about the entire WNBA ecosystem, from front offices to fans, confronting new expectations about who gets to lead, how that leadership is expressed, and what happens when traditional systems meet once-in-a-generation voices. Clark has shattered scoring records, attendance records, and viewership ceilings. Now, she may be shattering institutional norms. And whatever comes next, split, truce, or tension-filled dance, will ripple far beyond Indiana. Because in 2025, the WNBA isn't just about winning games. It's about who gets to shape the game itself. So now, the question shifts to you. Was Caitlyn Clark right to finally speak out? Is Coach Stephanie White holding back a generational voice or protecting a team-first culture? And most importantly, can this relationship survive under the blinding lights of the WNBA? Because one thing's for sure, Police Garlight, this story is far from over. The silence is broken. The truth is out. And the basketball world will never be the same again. Back end index pointing down, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you stand with Caitlyn or Coach White? And what do you think the Fever should do next? Loudspeaker if you found this breakdown powerful, dramatic, and thought-provoking. Don't forget to like the video, share it with every WNBA fan you know. And hit subscribe so you never miss a single twist in this unfolding saga of power, pressure, and truth in women's basketball. Fire. Movie camera, because around here, we don't just tell the story, we live it.